Suspended Rivers Governor Fubara to join APC after Tinubu's deal. Political intimidation in bid to crush opposition before 2027 polls. Hello viewers and welcome to Infogist TV. In a major political twist that could reshape the 2027 electoral landscape, exclusive information obtained by reporters revealed that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has finally coerced Rivers State Governor Similayo Fubara into joining the ruling All Progressive Congress (APC), following months of intense political pressure, institutional intimidation, and strategic coercions. This development, sources say, is the culmination of a calculated campaign by the APC-led federal government to weaken opposition strongholds across the country ahead of the next general elections. According to sources, the objective is to consolidate power, neutralize political threats, and ensure that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's course to victory in 2027 was minimal resistance. Multiple sources familiar with the situation describe the pressure mounted on Governor Fubara as unprecedented and deeply troubling in Nigeria's democratic history. The federal government allegedly using every state apparatus from the judiciary and security agencies to the National Assembly launched a coordinated offensive aimed at undermining Fubara's authority and isolating him politically until he had no viable options but to capitulate. At the center of this political storm is the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike, Fubara's political godfather turned adversary. With federal backing, Wike spearheaded a relentless campaign to bring Fubara to his knees. From orchestrated legislative threats to judicial maneuvers and threats of impeachment, Wike was said to be acting with the full blessings of the presidency. The president wanted Rivers State under control by any means necessary, one source is disclosed. The fear of the 2027 is real. Their internal assessment showed that public discontent was growing over hardship, insecurity, and economic mismanagement. The only way out was to break the opposition and enforce loyalty state by state. This explains why, according to political observers, the presidency turned a deaf ear to the outcry from prominent Nigerians and civil society groups who condemned the sustained political siege on Governor Fubara of Rivers State. Sources says the turning point came during the controversial 2025 London Peace Accord, a high-level secret negotiations between suspended Governor Fubara, and the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. It was during this meeting that Governor Fubara agreed to join the APC in exchange for political survival, one of the sources said. In April, during a working visit to London, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu met with the suspended Rivers State Governor Similayo Fubara. The meeting, confirmed by the African Report, has not been officially acknowledged by the presidency. According to officials, it marks the first face-to-face encounter between Tinubu and Fubara since the president declared a state of emergency in Rivers State and removed Governor Fubara and his deputy Ngozi Odu from the office. As part of the terms, the embattled Governor Fubara would be reinstated, albeit under strict conditions, with control of Rivers State resources now shared or closely monitored by the ruling party's power brokers. The same Wike who publicly derided and sought Fubara's removal is now singing a different tune, recently describing the governor as his son and denying ever fighting him. In a recent interview with BBC Pidgin, Wike denied fighting with the suspended Rivers State governor, saying, "Fubara is my son. Why will I fight with him? I'm only fighting against people who want to steal what they did not work for. When you do not defeat them, they will think you defeat them to the final stage. Now they are ashamed because they are being defeated. They are the ones pushing Fubara." According to the publications, Wike noted that he had told Fubara during a visit that he was ready for peace if Fubara was ready as well. "I told him that you have a yam in your hand and a knife. I told him that you have a yam in your hands and a knife. You are the one that knows how you want peace. If you want sincere peace, you take. If you want dubious peace, you also take." This abrupt political U-turn has left many Nigerians disillusioned. Fubara has been beaten into submission, and the River State has been turned into a pawn in the power game of Abuja, one of the sources say. No governor has ever suffered such humiliations as Governor Fubara suffered in the history of Nigerian politics. The source lamented how Fubara, a governor, was humiliated, tormented, and politically crushed to force him into the ruling party. No governor has been subjected to such abuse of power in Nigeria's history. How Tinubu declared emergency rule in Rivers State. On March 18, 2025, we should recall that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu invoked Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution as amended to declare a state of emergency in Rivers State, citing a breakdown of law and order and failure of the constitutional mechanism to resolve the escalating political crisis in the state. This declaration followed months of intense political turmoil between Fubara and his estranged political godfather Wike. The conflict, which began shortly after Fubara assumed office in May 2023, led to repeated attempts by a faction of the State House of Assembly to impeach the governor, violate destructions of government properties, and a governance vacuum in the State Executive Council. Citing the state government's inability to maintain public order and coordinated essential governance functions, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu also secured a controversial National Assembly approval for the emergency declaration as required by the Constitution. He stated that the crisis in Rivers had become a national security concern with implications for democratic stability. Following the proclamation, Governor Fubara and his deputy Ngozi Odu were suspended from office along with key state officials, and the state's executive and legislative functions were dissolved. The president then appointed a sole administrator, retired Vice Admiral Ibokete Ibas, believed to be loyal to the presidency, to take charge of governance in the state during the emergency period. The move was widely condemned by opposition parties, civil society groups, and constitutional scholars who argued that the declaration was politically motivated and violated democratic norms. Critics accused Tinubu's administration of using federal power to suppress dissent and consolidate control over opposition strongholds ahead of the 2027 general elections. Despite public outcry, the state of emergency remained in effect, and the federal security forces took over key government institutions in Port Harcourt, further deepening fears of a creeping authoritarianism under the guise of constitutional emergency rule. Recall that by this time last year, Governor Fubara said River State had been liberated. People trooped to the churches to thank God for setting them free. According to Fubara, the state, its people and resources had been in clutches of a rapacious and gluttonous politician. That fellow decided who was what. Every month, that fellow dipped his hands into the treasury and seized a fat chunk of the state's revenues. The man had wanted a third term through the back door and had foisted a fitting lackey in Fubara over the people as his puppets. But Fubara broke the strings and cut the shackles that bound the state, and the masses rejoiced. Now, 1 year later, Fubara has chickened out. Indeed, a lot of water has passed under the bridge since the liberation of Rivers State. The Supreme Court has validated the expired Rivers lawmakers, saying that the seats of defecting lawmakers can be declared vacant by any court, even if the Speaker of the Assembly defied the law by not declaring it vacant. A preposterous decision. The lawmakers loyal to the Fubara's estranged godfather have served him an impeachment notice. Tinubu has dismantled democracy in Rivers, claiming he did it to forestall a breakdown of law and order. Fubara has not contested the unconstitutional declaration that removed him and imposed a military sole administrator on the state. The National Assembly has sabotaged the constitution and approved Tinubu's perfidy, so Fubara perhaps knows that the liberation has been effectively ambushed. Following the removal of Fubara and the hiking of Rivers, the people have been restive. They have protested against the total capture of their state. They have poured opprobrium and curses on a certain Nebuchadnezzar and his highly placed enablers. Some states have approached the Supreme Court to notify the obnoxious declaration of a state of emergency and arbitrary suspension of democratic structures as an abuse of power by a presumptuous president. The Supreme Court has been dragging its feet, perhaps unmindful that that which has crippled a state legislature might someday banish the Supreme Court. But it's now known that Fubara, who had been resilient, has succumbed to the intimidation, probably the televised vote by his godfather that an impeachment was his preferred option did the trick. Perhaps it was the suggestive, outlandishly magisterial comportment of the illegal sole administrator and the brief insinuation that the state of emergency would be extended that weakened Fubara's knees. In truth, Fubara has never pretended to be a lion. In the beginning, he was a dove or a sheep. Nearly all his commissioners were appointed for him without a whimper from him. This is coming from Ugoji Ebojo. He further stated that then he was the figure of a mistreated goat. His state's resources were being siphoned daily, and he could only watch. When it appeared, the leech would be put on his scrotum and tied to a tree in the backyard to publicize his servitude and prevent him from fathering independent ideas. He broke loose like an indignant ram. That was all. The masses did the rest. Fubara is not a dog of war, and nobody expects him to grow canniness overnight. But why would expect a liberated people to return with him to sheepiness? Fubara has visited his godfather, perhaps to plead for mercy. The details are still sketchy. We do not know if he knelt or prostrated before his former political deity. Before long, the garrulous deity will organize a media chat to describe in full Fubara's countenance on that occasion. But we know Fubara went to London to see the president. He has never ceased to pledge his loyalty to the president who dismantled democracy in Rivers State. We cannot deny the reality that Fubara is cornered. His options are few. He cannot but negotiate with people from whom he had liberated the states. Since trust is shattered and he appears trapped and his spirit is fretful and his opponents are ruthless and capricious, he has to be pitied. These people are called political entrepreneurs. It's inconveniable that any reconciliation mediated by those who masterminded or enabled his travails would let him off the hook without restoring the strings of puppeteers. The secret meeting can only yield a naked return to servitude. So, how can Fubara avoid a brutal checkmate without surrendering the state? This is the question of the people. River State is being raped. Fubara cannot continue fumbling around like a frightened chicken. He cannot continue clandestine negotiations that will legitimize state capture under any guise. He is free to resume his duties as puppet, but he must know that that will make him reprobate. He shouldn't count on the people to return with him to servitude. Although his position is precarious and he has no easy escape route, he cannot be forgetful. He must insist on mediations by a committee of impartial national statements so that even if Pharaoh gets something for his hungry throats, the people are not forced back into captivity in Egypt.